1:17 a.m. Gale. Did Loree ever live in your house, Brent? 1:17 a.m. Brent Spiner. Yes, she did for a while. I had to bolt my bedroom door every night. 1:17 a.m. Gale. Why did you let her do that? 1:17 a.m. Brent Spiner. It was all a part of her plan. Because if I didn't, she would kill you. 1:18 a.m. Gale. When did she live in your house? 1:18 a.m. Brent Spiner. It was after you took up Franco Nero. 1:18 a.m. Gale. So from when to when did she live in your house? Brent mentions it was from about the time Gale took Franco Nero to the time Gale discovered she was a Vatican agent. 1:19 a.m. Brent Spiner. It's a pretty long story, but I was able to get rid of her around the time you discovered she was a Vatican agent and we got back together. 1:19 a.m. Gale. Yeah, I noticed that. When did you know she was a Vatican agent? Was it only after I told you? 1:20 a.m. Brent Spiner. Yes, it was you that alerted me. 1:20 a.m. Gale. Actually, it was Jesus who told me. He told me with a still small voice around 2 a.m. on a cold Seattle night. How did you feel when I told you that God told me she was a Vatican agent? 1:21 a.m. Brent Spiner. Well, I didn't believe in Jesus then, but it all made sense to me then. 1:21 a.m. Gale. I see. You might have possibly thought that I was imagining it was Jesus and that my own brilliance actually figured it out. 1:21 a.m. Gale. I really believe it was Jesus. 1:21 a.m. Brent Spiner. Well, I believe it was Jesus now, too. 1:22 a.m. Gale. What did you think back then for the purposes of my script? 1:22 a.m. Brent Spiner. What do you mean? 1:22 a.m. Gale. I mean, when I told you that I thought it was God who told me that Loree was a Vatican agent. 1:23 a.m. Brent Spiner. I didn't believe in God, but I knew that it all made sense. And I came to the conclusion that it was your own brilliance that put it together. Either way, I wasn't questioning it. 1:24 a.m. Gale. That makes sense. You have always respected my religious beliefs, which has always amazed me. Some people have been very threatened by them, but never you. Why? 1:24 a.m. Brent Spiner. Well, I think people have a right to believe what they want, as long as it doesn't harm anyone. 1:25 a.m. Gale. Oh, I see. I used to talk extensively about my religious beliefs with you. I even played whole sermons on the phone for you when I lived in Texas. Do you remember that? 1:26 a.m. Brent Spiner. I remember that. I may not have been a Christian, but I still thought it was pretty cute. It was just a part of you. 1:26 a.m. Gale. I'm just curious. Did Loree ever hear some of those sermons? 1:26 a.m. Brent Spiner. She did a couple times, and it sent her running out of the room to go throw up. 1:26 a.m. Brent Spiner. I was glad. 1:27 a.m. Gale. That's great. It's because she's demon possessed. 1:27 a.m. Brent Spiner. Yeah, I bet it was painful for her. 1:27 a.m. Gale. I was putting King James Bible preachers on my phone, and some of what they preached was strong. 1:28 a.m. Gale. How could you stand that woman's presence in your home? Didn't she try to attack you in your home? 1:28 a.m. Brent Spiner. Yes, she attacked me often, especially whenever she caught me talking to you. Like I told you, I had to sleep with my door bolted. 1:29 a.m. Gale. Where did she sleep? 1:29 a.m. Brent Spiner. She slept in her own room. 1:29 a.m. Gale. I bet when you left your room you were as nervous as hell. 1:29 a.m. Brent Spiner. Yes, every morning. 1:30 a.m. Gale. Did you ever go so far as to wear a bulletproof vest around her? 1:30 a.m. Brent Spiner. Yes, I did. 1:30 a.m. Gale. What else did you do to protect yourself? 1:30 a.m. Brent Spiner. Sometimes I came downstairs wearing a football helmet because she would hit me in the head with frying pans and baseball bats. 1:30 a.m. Brent Spiner. Yes, and I bought a chastity belt. 1:30 a.m. Brent Spiner. It was electrified and everything. 1:30 a.m. Gale. What's a chastity belt? 1:31 a.m. Gale. She took a plasma torch to your belt? 1:31 a.m. Gale. You said she never raped you again after 1992. How could this be if she was living in your house? 1:31 a.m. Brent Spiner. I was pretty clever. I didn't eat any food from the house. Gale asks about Terrance. 1:31 a.m. Brent Spiner. Yes, he's fine. 1:32 a.m. Brent Spiner. He said his phone was dying and he had to go home to recharge it. 1:32 a.m. Gail. Where did you eat? 1:32 a.m. Brent Spiner. I got a lot of fast food mostly, or went out to eat. It wasn't very healthy sometimes, but at least it didn't have drugs in it. 1:33 a.m. Gail. I don't blame you. Give me a description of a typical day in your life with Loree when she was living in your house. 1:33 a.m. Brent Spiner. Well, I'd wake up and check my body and my sheets to make sure nothing happened during the night. I'd be very sleepy because I would sleep lightly and wake up every few hours to make sure she wasn't in the room. I actually videotaped myself sleeping at that point to see if I could catch her doing something. 1:34 a.m. Brent Spiner. Are you still there? 1:34 a.m. Brent Spiner. Oh, okay. 1:34 a.m. Gail. Yes, I'm still here. That's Terrance you're hearing. 1:34 a.m. Gail. I think he got disconnected. 1:34 a.m. Brent Spiner. Weird. 1:35 a.m. Brent Spiner. I think he just went home. 1:35 a.m. Gail. Yeah, is he okay? 1:35 a.m. Brent Spiner. I'm sure he is fine. Last I heard from him, he needed to charge his phone. 1:36 a.m. Gail. Let's go back to 1992, the end of the year. How often did Loree visit you, and did it get worse over time? 1:36 a.m. Brent Spiner. It got worse the closer we got to each other. She would back off a little when you and I weren't speaking as much. 1:37 a.m. Gail. Yeah, I noticed she called me in July 1993 when you called me and made love to me. You gave me silence when my son was in the hospital. Why? 1:37 a.m. Brent Spiner. Loree knew about your son being in the hospital, and when I went to call you, she had cut all the phone lines in the house. 1:37 a.m. Brent Spiner. Then she tied me up and left me in the basement for days. 1:38 a.m. Gail. What did she do to you in the basement? 1:39 a.m. Brent Spiner. She started threatening me again. And then that was when she took off my chastity belt and started electrocuting my testicles with some kind of cattle prod. 1:39 a.m. Brent Spiner. Then she hooked me up to an electro-ejaculator, which was a machine that basically milks a man like a cow, only it's semen. 1:40 a.m. Brent Spiner. It hurt pretty badly. 1:40 a.m. Brent Spiner. After a while, she let me go. 1:40 a.m. Gail. Did you have any food? 1:41 a.m. Brent Spiner. No, and I think that's why she might have done it. She was going to have me starve down there and then force me to eat drugged food. 1:41 a.m. Brent Spiner. But I resisted, and so she gave up. 1:42 a.m. Gail. So you would rather starve than have her drugged food. And she realized she had a lost cause. But why didn't she inject you and force you to eat her food? 1:42 a.m. Brent Spiner. I had found all her syringes and flushed them down the toilet. 1:43 a.m. Brent Spiner. She was pretty angry about that. That was the first thing she went for. 1:43 a.m. Gail. Oh, and she couldn't leave you because then you'd escape, right? 1:43 a.m. Brent Spiner. Yes, she knew I would try to escape right away if I heard her slam the door or heard the car leave. 1:44 a.m. Brent Spiner. So she prepared me food from the house and sprinkled in the drugs. 1:44 a.m. Brent Spiner. She figured I would be so starved that I would eventually give in. 1:44 a.m. Gail. Wow. She really had you convinced she would kill me. 1:44 a.m. Brent Spiner. Yes, I really thought she would. I mean, she was capable of doing such horrific things. 1:45 a.m. Gail. Did you ever think about reporting her to the police? 1:45 a.m. Brent Spiner. Of course. And I got the same reaction as you did when you reported the fires to the police. Loree McBride owned all of the police. She had bribed them. 1:45 a.m. Gail. Those Jesuits. How often did you see her in 1993? 1:46 a.m. Brent Spiner. What was going on around that time? I'm fuzzy on dates. 1:47 a.m. Gail. That was when I was in Seattle the first time. I was studying at the Institute of Children's Literature, and I started my novel that summer, I believe. 1:47 a.m. Brent Spiner. Silver skies? 1:47 a.m. Gail. Yes. 1:47 a.m. Brent Spiner. Oh, she was vicious then. 1:47 a.m. Gail. But how often did you see her during this time? 1:47 a.m. Brent Spiner. It was at least every day. 1:48 a.m. Gail. Oh, that's terrible. 1:48 a.m. Brent Spiner. I was constantly running for my life. 1:48 a.m. Gail. At least once a day? How many times a day? Was she meeting you in your yard, your car, your workplace? Where? 1:49 a.m. Brent Spiner. Everywhere. Sometimes she would just do something creepy like leaving a pile of burning dildos in my yard or drawing penises all over the side of my house in lipstick. 1:50 a.m. Brent Spiner. Other times she would surprise me by hiding in my car or closets and attacking me, slapping and scratching me like some kind of demon. 1:50 a.m. Brent Spiner. She was like a cat with rabies. 1:50 a.m. Gail. Brent, did you ever consider giving me up so you could get rid of her? 1:50 a.m. Brent Spiner. No, never, unless her man would have. 1:50 a.m. Gail. I am certain. 1:51 a.m. Brent Spiner. But I didn't mind giving you up to Franco Nero if it meant you were safer. Of course, it turns out you weren't, since she was going to go after Franco Nero then anyway. 1:51 a.m. Gail. What exactly did she try to do to Franco in December 1996? 1:51 a.m. Brent Spiner. Well, she tried to rape him the same way she did me. She was going to repeat the same thing all over with Franco and latch onto him instead. 1:52 a.m. Gail. What happened? 1:53 a.m. Brent Spiner. What's that? Did you have another question too? 1:53 a.m. Gail. No, I went to turn on the AC. I'm getting mild hot flashes. 1:54 a.m. Brent Spiner. Franco found her in his house when he got home one night, and she was sprawled out on his couch wearing lingerie. She was drinking a wine glass with some black wine in it, and when she went to sip it, it turned silver on her lips. He freaked out and threw her out of his house, then called me. 1:54 a.m. Gail. I see. Is that as far as it went? 1:54 a.m. Brent Spiner. Franco might have only told me the short version. I could call him up and ask him again. 1:54 a.m. Brent Spiner. He was very panicked on the phone and stumbling over his words. 1:55 a.m. Gail. I'm sure he didn't tell you everything. I don't know if she had sex with him. What do you think, Brent? 1:55 a.m. Brent Spiner. She may have touched his penis at some point. 1:55 a.m. Brent Spiner. She loves her penis. 1:55 a.m. Gail. Knowing her, it's possible. 1:55 a.m. Brent Spiner. She's obsessed with men that have big ones. 1:56 a.m. Gail. She's a pervert. During the summer of 1996, when I was groveling in despair over Loree because I just found out about her, what was her reaction? 1:57 a.m. Brent Spiner. She loved it. She spent all night dancing and jumping on her bed, swinging around her dildo, saying it was party time. 1:58 a.m. Gail. Why did you increase your television appearances at this time and mention her as your girlfriend? It made me totally lose respect for you at that time. 1:58 a.m. Brent Spiner. I was doing it to protect you. If I didn't do as I was instructed, she would have killed you. 1:58 a.m. Gail. How was she planning to kill me? 1:58 a.m. Brent Spiner. Do you remember when she blew up one of her clones in a car? Around July 2001, when Brent flew out to Florida to try and be with Gail, Loree blew up one of her clones in the car, telling Brent it was Gail. When he began crying over this, Loree then admitted that she really blew up one of her clones. This was punishment to Brent for trying to be with Gail. 1:58 a.m. Brent Spiner. She was demonstrating what she was going to do to you. 1:59 a.m. Gail. I see. Did you ever ask yourself why she never carried it out for so long, even though she constantly threatened? And did you never wonder why she was so obsessed with me? Did it never occur to you that she might be part of a bigger conspiracy? 2 a.m. Brent Spiner. I thought she might have been part of the conspiracy, but I thought it was centered around Paramount Studios, and that was it. I didn't know about the Jesuits. 2 a.m. Brent Spiner. And I think she loved the power she had over us too much to just go and kill you and ruin her fun. 2:01 a.m. Brent Spiner. It's like she fed off of our suffering.